Yeah, it was quite profound. In the moment, I didn't really take it all in, but it was after when I thought about it, where I said, no, you know, you look at that. Most of us will admit to stealing something from a store. Mm-hmm. Most of us will admit to lying about something. And this pastor that asked the third question, he didn't even ask, okay, have you ever engaged in wayward sexual activity? He just said, who here has ever had a wayward sexual thought? And to a man, I mean, like, nobody's hand went up. And it was a room full of liars at that point.
Yeah, every single one of them.
Yeah. So yeah, it just punctuates how much of a hang-up we have with sex in the religious realm, that we're not even willing to admit that we sometimes have sexual thoughts of a certain nature.
Seeing that we run out of time, just a couple things I want to just touch on as we go. One of the things here, you explained that fornication isn't premarital sex, and that's the term we use to justify the premarital sex, but it's defined wrong.
Yeah, in the Bible, the word that is translated fornication into English as fornication, there are two words. One is Hebrew from the Old Testament, the other one is Greek from the New Testament. So zana from the Hebrew Old Testament and porneia from the New Testament Greek are both translated into English as fornication. And in all cases, those words refer not to singular activity such as sex before marriage. It refers to all manner of sexually immoral behavior. Mm-hmm. So it could refer to adultery, it could refer to bestiality, it could refer to homosexuality. It could generally refer to promiscuity, where you're just sleeping around with different people. All of that falls under the umbrella of porneia or zana, which we have in English as fornication. So fornication is a broad term. It refers to sexual immorality, sexually immoral behavior, and not premarital sex as we have defined it in the modern.
Could we also touch on dating and how this Western world idea of dating is basically a recipe for disaster?
Yeah.
And we set ourselves up.
Yeah.
And then we chastise and criticize the people who fall victim to, you know, their human nature.
Yeah. I remember when it started to dawn on me that, you know, because you sit down sometimes trying to figure out life, and you wonder why certain things happen, why you behave a certain way, why other people behave a certain way. Mm-hmm. And it's not until God gives you some insight into what it is that's actually wrong that it begins to make sense. And when you compare what we do today to what was done in biblical culture, it seems like they were wise enough to recognize that you don't let men and women hang out with each other for extended periods of time when you know they really like each other, and then expect them to remain pure. Mm-hmm. You know, that's just a fool's errand in order to let that sort of thing happen. So ancient cultures were wise enough to say, okay, we're going to set it up in such a way that we limit contact between two people. Mm-hmm. We have a situation where they arrange marriages, and so when your son or daughter is of a marriageable age, it is cultural, as it is expected that they will find themselves a wife or a husband, and the family does the work of vetting through eligible candidates. Of course, if a family is wise, they're going to say, okay, you know, what sort of preferences do you have for girls? Do you like them, you know, big butt, large breasts? Do you like them petite, tall, whatever, right? And you'll give your input, or your family will just know based on the fact that they know you've grown up with them, that, you know, likes this sort of girl. So we're going to look for somebody like that with character traits that would make for a recipe for a good marriage. So wise parents set up things in such a way that they approach other families to say, my son is interested in marrying your daughter, or vice versa. Can we make this happen? And the son would probably have already seen the girl and liked her, and maybe the parents would already have known, so it's a natural thing, and then they hook that up. But in limiting the contact between them, you don't have this sort of opportunity for sexual activity to take place and people to feel bad about all of that. In today's world, we say, remove all of the shackles, take away any hindrances, and let two people just go at it. So we look now for people to discover love for themselves. Sorry. Well, the problem with when you fall in love with someone is that you're naturally going to want to be with that person. And in order to be with that person, you're going to want to share yourself in every way, including sexually, because that's just natural when you love someone to do that. In ancient culture, love was more found and developed in the context of marriage. In today's world, we discover love apart from marriage, and then we date for such a long period of time, oftentimes, that a lot of the magic and mystery and excitement has gone out of it in the dating and courtship phase. By the time we've entered into the marriage phase, it's sort of like anticlimactic. It's like, you know, been there, done that. We've done it so many times that it's... But since we're already with each other and we've been together for 4 or 5 years, let's just get married.
Right. And you know, that's something I want to bring up. Is the whole concept of marriage. I read in James that it says, no man should take an oath. Your yes should be yes, your no should be no. But in marriage, when you come to marriage, I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's an oath. And I really believe, after reading your book and just my own personal opinions, and me being a man, you look at guys, they can live with a woman for years. They're doing everything a married couple does. Mm-hmm. But just that thing of, okay, let's get married. It just brings up these... And then they get blasted for, you know, oh, you can't commit, you're this, you're that. You have other people talking in the woman's ear, oh, he doesn't love you, this and that. But, I mean, you look at God, and God has no... He doesn't define himself. He doesn't allow himself to be placed in a box. He says, I am that I am. And I think us being a role model, we should follow that suit. So when you look at the effect of placing a definition on something, the effect of taking an oath now for something that should be, I mean, love is free. Love is, I mean, when you want to have, that's why, you know, like in the dating phase, it's so passionate. So because it's not confined to these definitions, to these locks that you put on yourself. It's allowed to breathe. It's allowed to flourish. But entering into this box all of a sudden, it kills that love. Yeah. And you're not allowed, you can't, like, even if you don't, it's the same thing, you just feel this commitment. But, and then it goes back to James, it says don't take any oaths. Just let your yes be yes, let your no's be no's. If you love a lover, you don't have to sign your life away.
I think it would be wonderful if people could experience in marriage the kind of infatuation, excitement, and dating excitement that we get in dating. I mean, imagine what marriage could be like if you started out at the level where you start out when you just meet each other. Like that, you can hardly wait to see the person. They're exciting, they're interesting, they're enthralling. You just can't get enough of them, and all of that excitement, and you're married. Whereas, you know, now it's like, okay, after you've planned the wedding, you've been through all of the disappointment, the caterer not doing this, and the cake isn't turning out the same way, and the two families are fighting, and
you're almost broke.
Yeah,
that you got to start off with. I mean,
we've really set up and defined marriage in such a way that it's no fun. We've taken the fun and relegated that to dating, and then put all of the serious stuff into the marriage aspect of things, and then we wonder why
they fail.
Yeah, and why people don't really want to walk too quickly into that. It's, you know, it's too serious.
And then another thing too I want to mention when it comes to marriage, when it comes to you being from a conservative church, I'll call it conservative. You look at just the tradition that goes on in the conservative church as far as marriage goes. You mentioned in, I think, chapter 12, you're talking about ways that couples could keep the marriage going strong. One of the things that I think is an issue for a lot of women and men is that when you come to church now, the more conservative churches, you're not allowed to braid hair and all that. And they get that from the text. I think it's Corinthians. It says, do not adorn yourselves with braided hair.
Peter.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's a second verse in Peter, but that's more pertaining to worship.
Oh, yes.
But I read it, and I noticed that it's not exactly right, do not adorn yourself, but it says, do not let your beauty come from the outward adornings. Now, to me, I'm interpreting that as, well, it's saying don't let your beauty be defined by these things on the outside. Not necessarily you're not allowed to wear these things on the outside. Because if you're ready to think about it, do not let your beauty come from a contrite heart. It talks about the inner being.
Yeah, I think the apostle is contrasting the different types of beauty, and he's saying the beauty that is to be preferred is the inward beauty. He's not necessarily saying I forbid the outward adorning, but your focus should really be on how you adorn yourself inwardly.
Right.
And that's a lot of what Jesus is trying to drive home in his ministry.
Yeah.
A lot of the scribes and Pharisees were concerned about outward behavior. And Jesus says, you know, inwardly you guys are like whited sepulchres. You're like grave holes, in other words, on the inside. So what's most important is the inner person, but certainly you shouldn't neglect the outer person.
Right.
Because God is the one who created all of that.
I mean, that's why it says in so many places in the Bible, you know, God knows your heart, and God's looking at your heart. So that's what matters. More so than what you're wearing on the outside, how you look, how you style your hair. It's about what is inside of you.
Yeah. Otherwise, so many Hollywood marriages would work. Because you have all of the beautiful people getting married and hooking up in relationships and stuff, and if it was all about outward beauty, then we would have a model in them.
The example.
Yeah.
As a man, like looking at some of the more conservative women, the more closer to God we'll say, or more righteous they become, the more frumpy their attire becomes.
Yeah.
You know, if they stop doing their hair, I see some women with chin hairs coming out, and it's like,
yeah, that's always a hideous.
And it's like you see them, you know, pretending that, you know, that's, you know, because it's about love and spirit, but I mean, they're neglecting. I mean, you can't tell me that husband, when he sees that woman walking down the street with the fishnet stockings on, is not enticing him. It's not, and it's like, why are we putting down this culture on our women? Not to say that they need to look like hookers, but why can't they wear a gold earring? I mean, why did God make gold to begin with?
It's an imbalance.